You are listening to the Mark Guzman Podcast Experience. Today's episode of Real Realtors puts the City of Oakland in the spotlight. Our panel is David Pio and Ron Baniqued, both of whom I work with here at Baniqued Commercial Real Estate. We focus on two major issues that Oakland is dealing with: rent control exemptions and the future of the Coliseum Site. We also take a look at real estate investing and discuss strategies to use when deciding whether or not to invest in a property to flip. Enjoy. We're recording. Sweet. So thanks, guys, for coming on to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
No problem.
A special birthday episode.
Yeah, the Mark Guzman birthday episode.
That's what we should name the title, the birthday episode.
Yes, fun fact, we're all in our birthday suits. You just can't tell. Should have recorded this one.
Oh, man.
So, David, you just got back from an amazing trip. How was it?
It was fun. I was in China for 5 days and Vietnam for 10 days.
What did you do out there, work or
A little bit of work. One of my clients came out to meet me in China and as well as in Vietnam. And funny enough, Saturday night, we were out and about, and we were actually sitting next to a big group, which included one of my Chinese family clients right next to us. And as soon as that happened, I told all my friends, guys, all these girls in their group are off limits. Like, got to keep them off limits. So yeah, it was really fun.
That was a total coincidence too, right?
I thought he was in San Francisco because I was asking. Well, we were going to go to his hometown called Hangzhou, and asked him some, hey, where's a good place to eat and this and that. And he messaged me, and I was even timing my messages so it was nighttime for me in China and daytime for him in America. But apparently he went back and didn't tell anybody, and I was completely clueless. I thought he was still in San Francisco, and it turns out he was back in China. So we ended up running into each other, which was really funny.
That's funny. Now, I know you go out there quite a bit. What's the food like?
Hong Kong and San Francisco and LA are my 3 favorite food spots. The food's awesome. Shanghai's actually got really good food. I wouldn't call it my favorite, but it's really, really good out there too. Vietnam, like I was just telling Ron outside, food in Vietnam is really good. Their meat is terrible. Like if you ever try to go like a place that has steaks, their quote unquote 2 best steakhouses takes like Burger King Whoppers. Like they're super plain and bland and no flavor at all. But the rest of the food's really good. If you just eat, random food or a lot of street food, it's good. And even if it's not good, you lost like $1.30 for a small meal. So
it's really cheap.
It's like a win-win either way. Yeah.
Yeah. Ron, what's new with you?
Nothing much. Just working. Staying busy. We're going to the busy months of right now real estate, right in springtime, and just being active. Yeah.
And you're just now doing a deal with my father-in-law too.
Yeah, he's old school. He's a great guy, Dwayne. Man, that guy's got a lot of knowledge too. Yeah, we were doing the home inspection. He came by, and I talked to him for about an hour, and man, he really just brought a lot of things to my attention about the real estate market.
Yeah, he's been in real estate, I want to say, like 40 or 50 years, like a long time.
Yeah. He's telling me all about the different cycles in real estate and how you got to be able to play in all the arenas. The REO boom, you got to be ready for that. The short sale phase, and then the phase that we're in now where prices are just increasing. He was telling me that he's been in real estate so long, he's seen those cycles like 3 times.
Yeah, sounds like mine, yeah.
Yeah, total experience, though. Just a lot of experience. I mean, you learn so much from those cycles, especially into the dips.
Yeah.
What about any traveling? Anything new?
Traveling? No, nothing coming up. I'm probably going to have to hold my vacations off till next year. Just been too busy. But maybe next year I'm going to try to go to the Philippines or something and get out of town. Just take a little trip out there.
Yeah. You like the Philippines?
No, but my brother came back and he was talking about Boracay and all. He just keeps talking about how beautiful it is, and you got to check it out. It's one of those things like you have to see it.
Yeah.
So.
Have you been there before?
I just came back a month and a half ago. And then I was there. I've been there like 3 times.
Oh, from the Philippines?
Yeah.
Golly, Dave, you just travel everywhere. You might as well just be a blogger.
International realtor here.
Work remotely.
You should be a blogger. Just going different places. And
you should do that.
I actually have a few friends that do that, and they quit their job and they get paid. Like they don't get paid a lot, but they get paid enough to travel, and then they get all the main thing is they'll travel for free, and stay at the hotels for basically pennies on the dollar. So that's how they do it. So they don't make a lot of money. They might make 30, 40, 50K, but they'll do that. But then the flight is discounted or free. The hotels are discounted or free, that whole thing. So it's,
How do you even get started in something like that?
I have no idea. I have like 3 or 4 friends that do it travel wise. And one of my friends, she doesn't do it for travel, but she works for Manny the Frenchie. And it was the most, it's a super random story, but she works for Manny the Frenchie, and she got all into like social media and knows a bunch of ins and outs just working for a 1.1 million follower dog. So,
Sam, we got to get someone like that on the podcast and see how they do that.
I'll bug her. She's in Chicago. She'll probably come out here within the next year. I'll be like, Kimmy, you got to come out here and go on the podcast just to talk BS about it.
Yeah. Well, I want to learn how to travel and get paid for it too.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into some real estate here. Ron, I know you do some flipping homes.
Yeah, a little bit
and a little bit on side. I've done that before. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that, because I haven't, on these past episodes of Real Realtors, I haven't really gone deep into how do you flip a home. So when you're looking for an investment, what are you looking for?
Well, we're looking for a property that's, that has a lot of equity in it. Something that's probably distressed. So, I usually have like a bunch of guys that look at houses for me, drive around, and houses that look to appear to be abandoned. Then we just try to locate the owner. And usually we try to find houses that are just so beat up that you could either do cash or, you can only sell it with cash or hard money loans. That way the seller that knows that they're going to have to discount the price. But that's usually what we look for. And usually...
are those easy or hard to come by?
I do a little bit of marketing. And, I could ramp up the marketing. But, from the stuff that I push out, we average anywhere from 4 to 6 a year that we actually do. 4 to 6 flips a year.
It's a decent amount, especially if you're making a decent profit on each one.
Yeah. They're definitely lucrative. I can see if we ramped up our marketing a little bit more, we can do more. Like I recently, got my brother Brian into it, teamed up with him. We're trying to get other people as well, like Dave, to come on board to try to, ramp up some marketing and do a whole lot more than that. But yeah, it's real lucrative. It's just finding the right ones, because you could really lose your back on some. You could really lose if you don't calculate everything correctly.
Yeah, one of the issues I've seen with some, because I know some investors that do flips also, are foundations. And if you don't really check that foundation and then you have to replace it, that can be anywhere from 30, 40 grand up to 70, 80 grand.
And even higher than that, yeah. That's a good question. Like I seen this one house up in El Sobrani. It's kind of funny. It had serious foundation problems. At the time, I think they were only asking $130 for it. But this is when the market was a little bit lower. The ARV was only $300. So even if you fix that foundation, you weren't going to make that much money. And we bidded on it. We lost it. And it was funny because 2 years later, I met the guy that overbidded us, and he became my client. I sold him a house in Hercules, and he was telling me about how he bought this property that needed foundation work, and he thought he was going to be able to do this and that to it, but the city kept stopping him. Basically, just held on the property for 2 years, and he couldn't do nothing with it. The city wouldn't approve any of the plans. So yeah, those are the kind of dangers. When you walk in there and you try to take on some with foundation issues like structural or things like that, you got to really look into that stuff before you actually get it. Yes.
So
crazy.
Do you have a nightmare story, or just something that completely caught you off guard on a fixer?
Well, no. You get robbed a lot. I've flipped a house before, and right before the open house, I'm getting ready to put the signs in. All of a sudden, all the appliances are gone. The fixtures.
Is that still happening quite a bit now?
Oh, it happens. Yeah. So it's one of those things that when you're flipping a house, you gotta put that in the budget. Like have somebody stay there, put an alarm in, just constantly checking up on the property, because that happens.
I remember during the REO days, the copper, everything would get stolen and ripped out.
Copper from everything.
Yeah. But no, they're pretty normal stories. Anybody that's flipping a house, I'll tell you. I walked and showed a house in Richmond the other day, and noticed the lockbox was taken off, and I remember thinking, the pictures look like it's staged, and I peeked into the window. I guess somebody had broken into and stole all the stuff.
Wow.
I called the agent. I said, hey, did you move the lockbox? And he's like, no. Come to find out that somebody broke in, took all their stuff, the staging.
That's
So,
one
you
reason
know.
why, like, I try to hide the lockbox on all the rentals that I manage or put on the market, and I never put a for rent sign on the property
That's a
because
good
that's
idea,
a dead
yeah.
giveaway. Property's vacant. And in fact, I had a client a few months ago that said, "No, I want you to put a for rent sign in front of my property." I advised against it.
Yeah.
Week number 1, house
Makes
got
sense.
broken into because we put the sign up. It got broken into. Luckily, one of the neighbors contacted me, and we were able to take care of it. But still, like, someone broke into it, then we had to repair the door and the lock.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff happens. Is, unfortunately, like, it's just, some of the areas we live in, and got people out there that just look online all day for vacant houses and, houses to hit like that.
So what kind of capital is needed to flip a home?
Well, you can do it a couple of ways. If you go through hard money lenders, there's a lot of them that let you get in with 10% down, 20% down is the norm. There's some hard money lenders that will actually finance the construction cost. A lot of investors just do all cash. Sometimes it just all depends on the property. Like if you're going to get a property for like 50, 60 grand, it would probably not make any sense to do a hard money loan and pay all those fees. But if you're going to do something on a higher end, like a $700,000 house, you need to leverage it a little bit. Maybe, do 20% and finance the construction cost. So there's different options. It just kind of depends on the house, really.
Now, finding the deal, do you pay finder fees?
I do, yeah. So I got a couple sources on how I get them. I got like contractors that look out for me. They see abandoned houses, or if they come off a deal. But if they actually can, swing me a deal, we'll give them like a $5,000, referral fee. If they can bring us the deal. But yeah. So there's a couple of ways that we get them.
Now, David, you've been on the podcast twice. This is your third time now.
Yeah.
Being on the podcast.
You like me, I know.
Yeah. Who doesn't like David Pio? So you do mainly commercial deals, and we've had this discussion before, and for some of the listeners, I want to break down some of the terms that people hear in investment financing and investment property purchasing, cap rates and GRM. Can you break that down and explain how that's calculated?
Sure. So cap rate is short for capitalization rate. Basically what it is all your income, right? Excuse me, and it's annualized. So it's, what you expect to collect every month minus vacancy, because typically if you have a home or a duplex or a 100-unit building, it's not going to be 100% full all the time. You're always going to have some vacancy from people moving out, turning over, minus your property taxes and insurance, because even if you don't have a loan, you have to pay for that. Your repairs, your management fee, putting money aside for a rainy day, like to redo the roof, all your utilities, all that kind of stuff. And you basically come down to the bottom line called NOI. So if you have a business, because a lot of people can think of it that way, is, if you're running a business, you're going to have so much in sales, but then, hey, you have to account for paying your employees and paying rent and, buying the, whatever the supply is. So if you're a restaurant, you have to include, buying the food and things like that, and, putting money aside to, get new equipment or get new kitchen equipment, whatever the case may be. What are you left with at the end of the month, at the end of the year? And when you take that number and you divide it by your original investment or the original price, that's what a cap rate is. And the easiest way to think of it is it's what you expect to make on that given year with no loan, no leverage, no loan at all. And you still include the property taxes and insurance, because even if you don't have a loan, you still have to pay those two items. GRM, it's an easier, quicker, dirty one. I'm not a fan of it because it doesn't take all the different subtleties into account, especially number one being property taxes, because you can have two buildings right next door to each other and they'll have two completely different tax rolls. But that is basically all the potential income you make divided by the purchase price. So it's usually, it's almost like a payback time. So the higher the number, like if you have a GRM of, 20, that basically means it's going to take you basically 20 years to get paid back. If you have a GRM of 10, you're basically going to have a 10, in 10 years, you'll get your money back, off the initial investment. But it doesn't include all the caveats. So it's what I would call the rookie way to look at it, and I actually never recommend my clients do it. I have a very, very few select novice clients that look at it, and I show them, and I'll use it just in the first handful of meetings, and then I switch them to cap rates because I show them how easily things can change just by including the management on site, different utility costs on a building next door to each other. So it's something that people use, but they, or at least working with me, they quickly switch off it because it's kind of useless.
Yeah, GRM is something that many people teach in the real estate industry.
Yeah, and it's good for simple stuff. You know, it's a good, quick and dirty, you know, hey, how long until I make my money back? You know, 7 years, 14 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be. But it's not very valuable because, again, there's so many things that can change. You know, even the cap rate isn't the most, it's the most efficient one to look at it for year one, but then after that, there's so many other things that can change. You can have rental increases, you can have expense increases. So even the cap rate changes, and then you start going over to IRR, you know, things like that.
Okay, and what's that?
So IRR is taken into account from beginning to end, and the key part is there has to be an end. If you buy a building, have it rented, and then you sell the building, how much did you make over time? So for example, you might have a building that you buy for $1 million and you're making 10% on, and 5 years later you sell it for $1 million, you've basically, your IRR is 10%. But if you buy that building for $1 million and you're making 10%, 10%, 10%, and 5 years later you sell it for 5 times the value, you sell it for $5 million, well, you haven't been making, your whole investment didn't make 10%. You kind of made 10% year over year, but at the end you get a 5 times payout. So what did you really make? So it basically takes into account the whole time value of money concept. So it's probably the more advanced version. Only my really sophisticated clients that have a very clear goal in mind ask about that. Most of the time they kind of just want to know cap rates going in year one, and then what can they raise it to in the next 1, 2, 3 years. And then when they decide they know they want to sell it, then we can kind of backtrack and say, hey, what did you make over this 3, 4, 5 year timeline? You bought it for $5 million, you sold it for $8 million. These were your different cash flows. Then you can kind of give them a whole picture of, hey, you didn't just make 5%, then 6%, then 7% because you got a huge, you bought the building for 5 and sold it for 10. 5 years later, your IRR is more like 16, 17%. And you can kind of give them a more accurate picture as to what they made over that time frame.
And I think that's a definitely more accurate way to look at it, because if you put money in stocks, if you put money in 401k, I mean, you're really looking at the investment over time.
Right.
Why not do the same with real estate? In real estate, obviously, you have equity.
And everybody has different names. Dividend is the same thing as cap rate, which is the same thing as when you put your money in a bank, what's the rate they're going to pay you? So a CD account pays you 1%. That's basically the equivalent of a cap rate on a property is, 4%, 5%. And then a dividend is, 2%, right? But if you buy a stock for $100 and you sell it for $300, even if you've been making a 2% dividend, you didn't just make 2% over time. You made a lot more because you bought it 100 and sold it 200 or 300, right? So that's where the whole IRR comes into play.
Okay. Now, when someone's going in to buy an investment property, should they always have an entry and exit strategy?
Yes.
Why?
Even if they intend to keep it forever, most people in investment never do. California, they kind of incentivize you to keep things longer with the whole Prop 13 thing. The longer you hold a property and the more value gains, the cheaper the the tax base stays. So people kind of have to pay you an extra premium for it to be worth it to sell. And that's why the average person refinances at least, I think it's like every 3 to 4 years, just because in commercial, when you start over 5+ units, there's almost never a such thing as a 30-year fixed mortgage. It's all 30 years amortized, but it's, fixed for 5 years and then the rate starts to change, or fixed for 7 years or 10 years. And 10 years in an investment, as we've talked about before, is a lifetime, right? A million things can change. So people might say they want to keep it long term, but I'd say 80-90+% of my clients, they say that, and then for one reason or another, things change. I'm going to buy something in Oakland and San Francisco, and I'm going to hold it forever. And then now I got a guy that he's bought 5 or 6 buildings from me, and he's already sold one and relocated his money to SAC. And now he literally just sent me, his assistant just sent me all his numbers for another 2. One building's 11-12 million, and the other one's probably about 6 or 7. He had no intention of ever selling them. And now we were sitting talking for an hour and a half, 2 hours on which one should we sell? Should we keep both and do a cash out refinance and buy elsewhere? Where can I go? Things like that. So his intention was to stay there, but not anymore, and he was pretty adamant about it back in 2010, 11, 12. But, you add 5 years to the thing, to your timeline, a lot of things change in 5 years, let alone 10 years.
Ron, so do you deal mainly with buyers, listings, or do you also dabble in the commercial sector?
So I do a little bit of a even balance between buyers and sellers. I do mainly residential. I don't dabble too much in the commercial, but I know a little bit about it just from owning properties and things like that. But yeah, my main intent is really just for residential. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about rent control. Do you have a lot of experience with Richmond, Oakland rent control?
Real seldom. Yeah, I mean, I know it's a pain in the butt for the landlords.
Well, what about your clients too? When you're selling them a property, is that a topic that comes up quite a bit?
All the time. Yeah, especially if we're looking at like a fourplex. Especially for some investment, and the rents are really low, and they're asking like a real top dollar price for it, and the rents don't even justify the price on the 4 unit. Then you got to think about like how the heck are you going to get these tenants out of there? There's rent control, and then you got to go through all the procedures. So that's always a topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's definitely tough. What kind of conversation, David, do you have with clients when they're buying in a rent control area?
Most of my clients, they're fairly sophisticated, or at least they're I'd say above novice. The novice ones don't like rent control. Well, first of all, no investor really likes rent control, but there's some that don't mind it if the deal is priced well, versus others that just don't want to deal with it at all. I have a very few select clients. They bought in Richmond, and once Richmond enacted rent control, like, oh, I want to sell everything and get rid of this, and I was like, no, that's not how you do it, because everyone wants to think that way. So it's in the landlord side, or speaking from the landlord point of view, it takes a lot more finesse, and you have to really know what you're doing. It definitely becomes either more hands-on on the part of the landlord or on the part of a property manager, and you have to know all the tips and tricks and all the loopholes and things like that. And a lot of the times the tenants are just as savvy, but that's basically what it takes. It's been around for so long in the Bay Area. The people that have been around long enough kind of know how it is. It's more the beginner person that doesn't know how to do it.
Well, what shocked everyone was when Richmond passed it. And Richmond was the first city to pass it after some 27, 28 years, something like that.
When rents are going up by 15, 20% a year, yeah.
Yeah.
So rent's kind of out of control.
Yeah, and Oakland just passed a moratorium on their rent control as far as, not on the rent control, but rent increases on capital improvements.
Right. So their thing was, Oakland had a rule where if you spent, I forgot the exact number, something like $200 a square foot of your property for CapEx. So basically then the intent was, if you had to do major rehab on your building, new roof, new stucco, new walls, new this, new that, then you kind of don't have an old building anymore. You kind of have a new building, and new buildings aren't subject to rent control. So a lot of landlords, because there's been so many, rent control, the one thing it does do, and no matter how many times you explain this to people, they don't, in the city, they're kind of blindsided by it, because a lot of people don't want to see other points of view. They just want to stay in their bubble. When you have a tenant that's been there for 20, 30 years, you are not incentivized as a landlord, because you're just looking at money. You're not incentivized to update their unit. You're incentivized to keep it working, of course. The heater goes bad, window breaks, stove breaks, things like that. But you're never going to remodel their unit. It's not worth it for you to spend $20,000, $30,000 to make their unit all nice and pretty when they're not going to give you any more money. It's just a cost to you, and there's no benefit, right? So a lot of places were being kind of not dilapidated, but kind of headed towards that way. So you were seeing a lot of these old buildings that they needed roofs, and instead of just getting a whole new roof for $20,000, people were spending $1,000 here, $2,000 there, and they would just wait for tenants to call them when there's leaks. Same thing with stairs and paint and stucco and garages and kitchen and stuff like that. So a lot of these landlords came in on these, during the recession, on these fairly dilapidated buildings, or at least semi-run down. And they'd come in, and for example, I had a client that he came in, he did a new roof, he engineered the property to structurally retrofit it. The exterior was in pretty bad shape, so he redid all the exterior, ripped off all the old stucco, redid everything, redid the stucco, replaced a ton of windows, did the elevator, I mean, you name it. The guy spent a ton of
Sounds
money.
like almost a $200,000 job.
No, like much more than that. He spent a couple $100,000 on the building to redo everything. And by doing so, he crossed that threshold of, hey, you spent so much money on the building, you're kind of technically a new building. So he petitioned them to remove his building off rent control. And what happened is it was a couple hundred people that did that, because all these people were coming in flush with money, and they're buying these buildings for super cheap, and they're like, well, I'll make this building nice and pretty, but it's only going to be worth it if I can remove it off of rent control and raise these rents from $700-800 to $1,700-1,800 in the next couple of years. And what happened was the city approved, I think, a couple dozen at first, and then they saw that there was another couple hundred behind them, and they didn't want to. That wasn't the city's intent, even though it was in the rules. So they basically put a moratorium on it. Went, no, guys, that wasn't the intent of the law. We basically have to stop. So they kind of changed the rules halfway through, and a lot of people kind of sat there and they're like, but we just spent a ton of money on these upgrades.
There's a lot of pending applications.
Yeah,
right
they're
now.
basically like, we would have never done all these. We would have just did all the little minor fixes for a couple tens of thousands versus hundreds of thousands. It's only, otherwise we would have never done this. So now you kind of have a bunch of people in limbo.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, so that's the moratorium you're regarding.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
So the Oakland A's are offering the City of Oakland $135 million for the Coliseum in exchange for full ownership of the land. So what do you guys think should be done with that land? I mean, should they build a baseball stadium? Should they build hotels, housing, commercial? Ron,
I don't know.
what do you think?
There's a lot of good ideas that they could bring in that area. I mean, it's good land. I mean, you could put new shopping centers, put some housing. The list goes on and on. But I really don't have a, solid idea on what would benefit Oakland by putting it, by selling it and redeveloping that land. I don't know what would help them actually the best. We could add more housing. That might be a good feature, because as we see Oakland all over the place, is just getting driven up. So,
I saw a very interesting Twitter post the other day, this week, and I forgot the lady's name, and she went trending on Twitter, and basically she came out and says, let me break down some stats for you. She says, Cupertino, average sale price, $3.6 million. Average down payment on these closings is about 30 to 40%. Average average number of offers per listing, 8.1. And so she starts there and starts breaking down the same stats across Silicon Valley. Then says, let's go to the East Bay where it's cheaper. But it's very similar stats, except just the sales prices are a lot lower, like $900,000 in Oakland.
Right. But
you're still looking at 30 to 40% down payment, still about 6 offers on average per listing. And so she starts breaking this down, and then she goes to her hometown of Berkeley and shows a Google picture of one of the BART stations with a huge parking lot around it. And I guess people have been trying to petition the city to allow building condos there, and the residents keep fighting and wanting to keep it as a giant parking lot. And so she ended everything and said, how do you convince humanity to care about their fellow humans in allowing for more housing to be built? People value their cars more than people having shelter. And it was a good point.
Oh, they value their time more than people having shelter. I mean, look
Yeah.
at all the people that, there's a guy that might jump off the Bay Bridge. Let him jump or push him off. I want to get to work on time. I don't want to wait 30 minutes in traffic. So, I don't
Yeah,
think
you'll
it's
see
their
a ton of
cars,
people
it's-
drive right by.
Yeah, I mean, well, people drive right by. That's normal. But I mean, I've called out family and friends. They're like, who cares? Push them off. It saves me an hour of traffic. And it's like, your life's not that important, man. It's only like 30 minutes. Relax. You can relax for 30 minutes, while they try to save a dude or a chick or whoever it is. So, I know they were talking about moving to, I think it was Peralta College or Laney College, one of those two, right by the water. I think that would be super cool because it would be downtown. They were talking if they did that, they would have to put a much smaller stadium because people just don't go to ball games anymore. Baseball is kind of one of those dying or
It is dying
decreasing
off,
sports, which is
Yeah.
why they're changing some of the rules, like in extra innings, things like that.
They're trying to make it faster.
Oh yeah,
It's too
because
slow pace.
I have diehard baseball. I can't stand baseball, but I have diehard baseball friends that are like, "Why are they doing extra innings in preseason? Nobody cares. Let's just go home. They play again tomorrow." But don't they always play again tomorrow? So in regards to what they would do to downtown, if anyone's been in Atlanta, I think Atlanta has a pretty good setup in the sense that they got a downtown that's bustling, but then they also have a midtown that it's just as fun as downtown. So I could see, with all the construction, if they had that giant set of acres and they just built a small park and they did it right and they did it high, fairly medium or high density, turn into a midtown. And what happens is, if you turn that into a little midtown and it's got hotels and restaurants and everything else like that, the surrounding area is already changing for the better, but it's still not that great. That would just intensify it and speed it up, I think.
I guess Tesla's also rumored to be interested in it. It's 130 acres.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be
Quite a bit of
surprised. So, because Tesla is buying and leasing everything right now on the industrial side.
I heard even Ronnie Lott and his team of investors even made an offer on it at one point. Not lately, but it was actually higher than the one's actually on the table now. They just didn't consider it at the time. So yeah, I mean, I think they're going to get a little bit more for that. I think this is just a negotiating stage. They lowballed them, but they'll probably come up. But yeah.
Yeah, and Tesla's in the news lately too. Did you see that?
For the accident?
For the accident, and also their Tesla 3s, like their production line is a little slow behind.
Yeah. They're got a bunch. One of the big things for their production line I was reading was their seats, because their seat manufacturer seats, I guess, are not a very profitable industry, which is why there's only a handful of companies. And Tesla has a thing, or I guess Elon Musk has a thing where, if you're not doing it right, I'll do it myself. So they basically fired their seat group and started their own seats, and that was one of the big delays. Was we want to make sure we get the seats correct, because if you're sitting in it for all this time, we want you to be comfortable and this and that. So
I have to say, Elon Musk is savage. I mean,
Okay,
if he doesn't like something, he just builds it himself.
that guy's a monster, dude. Like, I love him. He's hilarious.
Yeah. You got a Tesla, right?
Yep.
Does that one drive itself as well?
On the freeways, it does. It doesn't see like red lights and stop signs and stuff yet. When they legalize it, when they make it legal to where, so the new 2017s, you can get them with, I think it's 8 cameras. When the new so they got all the hardware. The software just isn't enabled, even though they've done like demos on it. Whenever the state, California, legalizes it, I'm selling mine and getting one of the new ones for sure. Yeah. So I see now why everyone who has a Tesla like sells their old one and gets a newer one, because they just keep updating it and updating it and updating it. It's always,
And that's great marketing for Tesla, because as soon as, let's assume in 5 or 10 years they legalize it, and all of a sudden they update. Yeah, hopefully not. But once they update the software, I mean, you know how many cars on the road are going to be
it's
automated?
Instant. I mean, the people that have 2017 Teslas with the auto drive, if they made it legal tomorrow, Tesla sends out an update over your Wi-Fi or over your internet, and there you go. It's enacted. I mean, every couple of weeks I come to my car and it's, these are the new things that you have in your car. It's this and this and that and that. It's like, all right, that's a pretty interesting little add-on that I didn't have yesterday. All right, cool. So they're always updating their stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah, so it's, those are amazing cars. It's a little scary, when allowing the machine just drive itself.
Yeah, but if you think about it, when you're driving, how many millions of things are you thinking about? The argument you have with your significant other and your work and the music and the this and the that.
I don't know. Did you
get
hear
a text message?
And you know what? I know a lot of people that do pay attention to the road, and they're horrible drivers.
Yes. But with the car, the only focus is drive. There's and it thinks 100 times on that one simple task. It'll do it better and more efficient than you ever could. Because there's been times where I've been paying attention and had it on auto drive,
right.
And you get a text message, and by default you glance at your phone.
You look at your phone,
and all of a sudden, dee 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 dee, and then the car will slow down enough for me, and it's. Oh, well.
Yeah, when I was with Tahoe with Brian, I don't know if you heard this story. But, I was following him. He's in his Tesla, and I guess he falls asleep. So he falls asleep for about 20 minutes, and I'm just following him, and the car's driving itself. Yep. He stops at a stoplight, and the car in front of him goes, and his car goes straight into a
straight through
fence,
straight through the stoplight. Wow.
Busts his iron gate fence wide open and heads for the tree. And I thought that, I really didn't know what was going on. But he had woke up, caught himself, got out the car.
Yeah, because it doesn't see stop signs and stuff like that. It just sees it so when stops, i.e. in a freeway traffic, and then it goes. Yeah. So if you're at a stop sign or a stop, it won't. The
It'll
new
just go
ones,
So that's why they upgrade to the newer models.
the
then.
new 2017 ones see stop signs, pedestrians, things like that. You can't auto drive the 2016s and earlier on anything basically besides like a freeway or a regular moving traffic.
Yeah, and
like on a freeway traffic time, it's saved me. Like I've fallen asleep at the wheel 3 times and it's woken me up. Like I fell asleep by accident. I was coming back from SF and on the commute hours, and my friend was in the passenger seat because we had a conference, like a work thing, and he fell asleep on the bridge, and I'm in Emeryville in the carpool lane, and the car's coasting at 10, 15, 5, 0, 10, 15, 5, the typical traffic stuff, stop and go. And I was exhausted for the last 2-3 days of this conference thing, and I fell asleep, and I woke up in El Cerrito when the thing was giving me alert that I had to grab the steering wheel because it had been so long that it hasn't sensed me touching it. So I fell asleep for like 7 miles in stop and go traffic, and I've fallen asleep in traffic before, and typically what happens is fender bender, get out, oh my god, I'm so sorry, here's my insurance info, give me a call if anything, blah blah blah. So it's, yeah, in that sense, I'm not afraid. I love it. So it does everything.
It's cool. I've been in too when it was self-driving itself with Brian in the car, but it's just really weird just being there.
it is.
The car's coming right by you and it's stopping and it's moving. You're like, man.
I was just in a Tesla for the first time a year ago, and it was actually in Brian's Tesla. And we're driving up to Sacramento, and he's giving me a tour of some properties up there. And we're driving up there, and he's showing me his iPad and a couple of things real quick.
Sounds like him.
But the
Brian's gonna get a mail-in ticket from the CHP.
but the car was driving itself, and then it did beep, and he had to touch the handle.
Well, what's great also is, and I think they're pretty smart for doing this, is on the driver's HUD, you can see what the camera sees. So you could see whether you're in the lanes, and you could see that it senses the other cars next to you and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're flying blind and you don't know what the car sees. It shows you what it sees. So that's pretty cool.
I can't wait till everything's just fully automated.
Yeah, I'm just gonna,
driving wastes so much time. I could get so much work done if cars just drove themselves. Yeah. Have a laptop in there.
They all
and just
drove
work.
each other, drove themselves, and they all, it'd probably help a lot because there's a lot of people out there just can't drive.
Yeah.
You
that's what I said. Like people that
the rate of accidents are going to go down.
Yeah.
Imagine taking away every sleepy person, every person that's not paying attention, let alone every person that, can't drive. So
no, I'm hoping that would save a ton of traffic here because Bay Area traffic is horrible, and it's constantly fighting with Los Angeles.
Well, it's probably going to be the same because if you think about it, there's still going to be the same amount of cars. It's just going to.
But it's going to be more efficient.
Save time on accidents is probably what it will save.
Yeah, but also more efficient because you have some people that drive slower. There was a good study and test where they had cars driving in a circle following each other. And then they had one car kind of slow down a bit and then
how it
speed
impacts
up.
everything.
Exactly, yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so if you have cars that are fully automated and can communicate with each other on a gridlock, they would be able to efficiently get rid of that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So with traffic, obviously the traffic is due to a lot of people here in the Bay Area, a lot of people wanting to buy, average 6 to 8 offers per listing. Ron, how do you coach clients to be patient and take that fact into consideration when they're looking for property?
In traffic? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
As far as competing with other offers?
Competing with other offers, yeah.
Well, you just got to basically tell them how it is, just what to expect, be patient, and you got to help them understand the market. So every time I do make an offer with a client on a particular home, I usually run comparables of the homes that last sold. And, so based on what we come up with, I try to, tell them to add a little bit more and just be aggressive, There's a lot of things, just shorten up your contingencies, things just to make it look a little bit more stronger, in the listing agent's eyes.
Contingency.
Yeah. Do things like that. But yeah, it's one of those markets right now where, you have 6 to 8 offers on one listing, and
that's average. And I've competed on some properties that had 40 or 50 offers.
Right. you know, and it's kind of hit or miss because I've been on other situations where I thought there were just going to be tons of offers on this house, and I guess probably so did all the other buyers. And you know, my client wrote and he got accepted, and it's like, oh, wow, you know. But you know, it really comes on areas, you know, like Oakland area, you're gonna anticipate a lot of offers on that. Richmond, right there by the BART station, that area is super hot. Pinol's hot, Hercules hot.
So if the average down payment is 30 to 40%, someone coming in with, let's say, FHA, 3.5%, 4%, 5% down payment, is it impossible for them to buy, or do they still have a chance, or is that where you really have to focus on
your agent skills?
Agent skills.
You know, you gotta, you know, if you're coming in with an FHA offer, you're competing against, you know, large down payment cash offers. Sometimes your buyers got to make an impression. You know, write letters about how they love the house. You know, do things that are personal. Hand deliver the offer. Speak to the agent. Try to get, you know, try to be there when you present the offer with the owner. Just every little thing helps. You know, show them. You know, get a DU approval. Especially if they're doing FHA, you're gonna want to have a DU approval. Basically, you know, the lenders really looked at everything they got, and they're going to get approved, and there's going to be no problem. So, you know, just things like that, you got to go the extra mile when you got an FHA buyer, which I have a lot of. But, you know, it definitely is tough. I mean, if you're competing with conventional offers, 20% down, 30% down, you know, it's just one of those things that you got to make the seller understand, you know, like, hey, you know, this is a family, and they really love the house, and you know, they're going to move forward if we get accepted. And
you know,
like
in 12 years, I've never had a letter help me or any client, whether I represented the selling side or represented the buyer side. I had a handful, very few select buyers, the handful of houses I've done, you know, 2 or 3 buyers in the history I've had that, oh, I want to write a letter, and they just handwrite it. Well, and every time they wrote it out, I'm like, guys, this isn't helping. You're $30,000 less than the next guy on a $200,000 house. It's nobody cares.
Yeah, if you're not going to be close to the top, I think it definitely doesn't help. But if you're at the top and you're in the running, like top 3, and you guys are really close by, it can sometimes help. It like I had a listing. Yeah. Well, I've actually had a few listings where my client, you know, I showed them the offers plus the letters, basically everything. And they actually went with someone a few times because of the letter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, I've had that same.
But you have to, I mean.
I think more the other stuff you were saying, you know the agent, know that your reputation is gold. You know what I mean? If you, the number, I don't, tell me if I'm wrong, but my number one thing that I despise in this business is having to do my side of the work and the other agent's side of the work, and then still give them half. Like if you're the listing agent, I already spent all the money consulting this guy and helping them with this, helping them with that, getting it staged, getting inspections done, professional photos, this, you know, A, B, C, D. You put on the market, price it right, host all the houses, and then you get the buyer, and the agent goes, cool, my offer's accepted, and they vanish. And then they still want, you know, 2-3% at the end. It's like, but you didn't do anything.
Yeah, and then you're constantly working with the lender and title officer, work with the buyer to get stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and it's different if, and I've actually got a deal like this right now. Or it's one of my residential deals for the year. And the guy's new because this guy could tell by his license number, but he's done like 3 or 4 deals before. So I know he's new. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you're new. Tell me if you have any questions. I'll help you. Just don't vanish, you know, things if you're new and, you know, you make it clear, hey, man, this is what I know, this is what I don't know. No problem. I'll help you out. That I don't mind. But it's when oh, okay, here, this is my 2 deals a year, and then I'm going to go vanish because it's, you know, a friend of a relative of mine that just felt bad, and no, I despise. Number one thing I despise. Like for that, I don't even want to pay him anything.
This industry is pretty small, and it seems like everybody starts to get to know.
Yeah,
you know who the quacks are.
Right. Yeah. Right. It helps if you know the person, you know, on the other side. Like, you know, I got an offer on such and such person, and I call them up. If I'm calling them, I'm representing the buyer, and they know who's doing the loan. They know I'm not wasting my time. Like I don't. If you're not a real client, you're not a real buyer, a real seller. I'm not. You know, it's not a question of.
Well, that's why it's important to network with other professionals and, you know, get to know who knows who. Because, like Ron, the deal you're doing with my father-in-law, he contacted me to get a recommendation on you as an agent, and I gave him a good recommendation and offer accepted.
You own 10% now.
10%. Yeah, no, he's old school. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it makes sense.
But that's the way it also works. Like if I have a client and they ask me, have you worked with any of these agents? Are they good?
Yeah.
Right.
What am I going to say?
Even if it's a little less, they'll take the one that's more reliable.
Exactly.
Then they're making all their plans based around that offer.
Exactly. And if I say, hey, I know this guy, and back in the REO days, he wrote up like 10 fake offers all the time.
Yeah.
And
that's
or
tough.
he would write offers on multiple properties for the same buyer, and then they would have 2 or 3 accepted, and then they'd back out of all of them but one. And so, and it was just a complete mess. And so they build up a bad reputation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I've dealt with an agent, and he was just so horrible. I mean, he like, you talk about disappearing in the middle of transactions. It's like this guy totally disappeared. Didn't even have the buyer's deposit in until I gave him a notice perform. Up until the last minute, then he sticks it in.
I don't know if people do that. I'll be international and I've put deals together.
Yeah.
I closed a 75-unit deal when I was on an island in Thailand.
Yeah, people do it, man. It's just some people just, like, I don't know if they're in a mom and pop operation or something. They don't have TC coordinators, or they're just not.
You don't even need. I don't have a transaction.
You know what it
coordinator.
takes, like for the deposit? It takes one email. You send an email to your client and say, hey, you need to get the deposit in by this Friday. Here's the address. Here's the escrow number. And here's a dollar amount that
you don't even need an address. Just go to your bank and wire it. It's $20 done.
Yeah. I mean,
it's really just negligence from the agent.
Yeah.
I mean, he should know. You get accepted, you got to hound and open escrow if it's not open already. Get the wire information, or get the address, or get the cashier's check. Get it in there. I mean, there's timelines that got to be met.
And it sucks for the buyer if they think everything's going okay, and all of a sudden there's a notice to perform, and if the agent is not even telling them, hey, get your deposit in, most likely they're not even giving them a copy or letting them know about the notice to perform, then the seller kills the deal, and they lose it just because they had a bad agent.
Bad agent. And unfortunately there's just a lot out there. I mean, there's a lot of part-timers, so they're not doing this full-time.
But you could still be a part-timer and do the job right. I mean,
you can, but I mean, sometimes,
I'm more concerned about the full-time agent that does 2 deals a year, and it's not like the agent that's been doing this 30 years and they're kind of semi-retired. I mean, like the agent that's really quote-unquote working, but they just can't put more than 2 deals a year, because those are the ones that they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, real estate's a tough, and only the strong survive.
90, hey, man, any sales out, 90% of the people do 10% of the business. The other 10% of the people do 90% of the business.
Well, that's why the average realtor only makes $35,000 a year.
I think in Cali it's like 45 or 50, something like that.
And then the really good ones make a whole lot.
Richmond's 39,000, and Danville agents 37,000.
Heck,
I remember we talked about
this.
Yeah.
Wait, where are these stats from?
Yeah, so if you actually look at the IRS puts out stats, and so you can look it up on their website, and you can search the stats of average income based on professions, based on city, zip codes, and Richmond agents make on average $2,000 more than Danville agents, just because it's more deals.
They do more deal volume on average.
It's less agents that want to sell in Richmond, that live and sell in Richmond.
A lot more action going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, the $1 million listen, they sit a little bit longer. Depending on the area.
Yeah.
Well, everyone looks at that bigger number and they say they want to sell those properties, right?
Yeah. So one $1 million deal every other year, whereas if you're an agent,
could do maybe 10.
You could do 4 or 5 deals in Richmond as a
correct.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference.
The volumes kick up quick. Yeah.
All right. So thank you guys for being on the podcast. And for people that are listening that want to contact you, what's the best way to contact you, David?
So my number is 510-815-2000. Whether I'm local or international, I pretty much always answer my phone. I don't sleep very much, so that's the easiest way.
From the Bay Area or sitting on an island
off
of the coast of Thailand, he'll write an offer for you.
I closed it. I closed my $1.13 million deal in between cities in Vietnam, so it doesn't matter. I'll do it wherever it counts. A laptop and a cell phone, and I'm good to go.
Ron?
My cell phone number is 510-913-1545. And you could call me anytime up until about 8 p.m.
Then he has to go to bed. He's tucking his dog.
Got to tuck in my dog.
All right, so thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lemon. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at markguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.